Welcome to this month's NAIFA Big Ideas webinar. I am Brendan Burnett, NAIFA's Director of Professional Development and Education, and today we are presenting Get More Qualified Sales Appointments in the next 24 hours. With me today is Wendy Weiss. Wendy is the queen of cold calling, and she is an author, speaker, sales trainer, and sales coach, and she is recognized as one of the leading authorities on lead generation, cold calling, and new business development. Her clients include Avon Products, ADP, Sprint, and thousands of entrepreneurs throughout the country. And Wendy has been featured in the New York Times, Business Week, Entrepreneur Magazine, Selling Power, Inc., Forbes, and various other business and sales publications. She is the author of Cold Calling for Women, Opening Doors and Closing Sales, and the Sales Winner's Handbook. Also, essential scripts and strategies to skyrocket sales performance. During the webinar, you may type your questions in the question box, and today's webinar is being recorded. As Wendy and I joke, this is an annual holiday tradition, having her join NAIFA for her cold calling expertise. Wendy, thank you for joining us today.
Oh, Brendan, thank you so much for inviting me to be here. I'm very happy to be here with all of you today. And yes, it is our holiday tradition, isn't it? Every December we do a webinar on business development. So here we are. And so I am going to bring up my slides, and here we go. We are talking about how to get more qualified sales appointments in the next 24 hours. And my, there we go. My goal for today, I want to teach you a system. It's a 4-step system that'll help you get more qualified sales appointments, which ultimately means more new clients, and that increases your income. So this is what we're going to be talking about today. I'm going to talk about some of the most common mistakes and how you can avoid them, how to make sure that an opportunity is actually a qualified opportunity. I'm going to be sharing my 4-step process. I actually call it my 4P process for setting more qualified sales appointments. I'm going to share the #1 secret to getting your prospects' attention and engagement. Why prospects say I'm not interested, and more importantly, how to get them to stop. And also, at the end of today's session, for those of you that want to grow your book of business faster, more easily, more profitably, I'm going to invite you to have a conversation. That'll happen all later. And also, as Brendan mentioned, I will be taking questions at the end of today's session, and that's always my favorite part of any webinar is the questions. So if you have questions as we're going along, type them into the chat box, and it will be my pleasure to answer them at the end. So let's begin by talking about why telephone prospecting is important and why it works, because sometimes people say, you know, today the phone is dead. And here's the thing. It really is, when you use the telephone, it is a direct introduction to the people that you want to meet. Because let's face it, no matter where you find a lead, whether they're a networking contact or they're a referral or you've met them on social media, or even if they're a cold lead, at some point you probably have to talk to them on the phone. So this is very direct, and it is powerful and under your control. In a way that email or say Facebook ads, that's not under your control. You put it out there and then you wait. Picking up the phone and talking to your prospects, that is under your control. You can reach the people that you want to reach at a very low cost. You don't have to go out and buy a whole lot of expensive equipment. You do need a phone, but I bet you all have phones. And it enables you to build rapport and create a personal connection with that other human being. It is also your fastest path to cash. There was research that was done at the University of Chicago Booth School of Business, and they tested written communication, like emails, like social media, like texting, like letters, written communication against spoken communication. like when you're in front of someone or you're on the phone, or even if you leave them a voicemail. And what they found was that when people hear you talk, even if it's on a voicemail, they are more likely to take action. They are more likely to say yes. And once you have a replicable system, once you have a telephone prospecting system, at some point, you can plug somebody else into it. So you can leverage your time by plugging someone else into your system. Make sense? Okay. So a little bit of background, because I want to share with you, I was never ever supposed to be a sales trainer. I was actually supposed to be a ballerina. I grew up in Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania. I moved to New York City, where I still live and work. And I moved here as a teenager, I was 17, to dance. I studied at the Joffrey Ballet School. And then eventually, like every artist in New York City, I needed a day job. And so I got a job with a telemarketing agency that did business development. And it turned out I was good at it. But here's the thing, because I was really, really lucky. There is this myth of the born salesperson, that somehow there are these people out there that are just born knowing what to do and what to say. That is a myth, and it does such a huge disservice. I wasn't I'm born knowing how to do this. I was lucky because I got this day job, and they taught me this skill, and they coached me, and they held my hand, and I got better over time. And that's the way it works. So today, I work with independent insurance agencies, financial advisors, business owners, people that need to develop new business, clients that they want results, and they want to double or triple their revenue. And also, as Brendan and I said earlier, we have our holiday tradition every year with this webinar. Here are some of the publications that have interviewed me, quoted me, where I've been featured: New York Times, Business Week, Inc., Entrepreneur, Forbes magazine. The point that I really want to make is it takes about 10 years to train a ballet dancer. It's a skill. It will not take you 10 years to learn how to do this, but it does take a little bit of time. And this is just the beginning. It's like taking a class with a teacher. You know, if you play a sport, maybe you like to play golf. The first time you picked up a golf club, you probably weren't terrific. Maybe you play football or basketball. The first time you picked up that ball, you probably weren't terrific. So what we're talking about really is a communication skill that can be learned and it can be improved on. So I want to introduce to you what I call my 4P prospecting process. It is the 4 steps to getting more qualified sales appointments. So I want to give you a taste of the full system. I'm going to break it down P by P, step by step. We're going to start with the step number 1, passing gatekeepers. Now, there are 2 types of gatekeepers that you might encounter anytime you reach out to any type of lead, whether they're a networking contact or a referral or even a cold call. You might encounter a human being, excuse me, a human being that stands between you and the person you want to talk to. Or you might encounter their voicemail, right? So I'm going to break it down. Start with the human beings. There is a myth of the Dragon Lady gatekeeper that has been with the boss for 40 years. This is a myth, and these women do not exist anymore. And you are much more likely to encounter a temp than you are someone that has been with the boss for 40 years. Now, one of the big mistakes that people make when they encounter a gatekeeper is they spill their guts. Here's another way. Here's a better way. Imagine for a moment that Indra Nooyi, calls up your prospect. Now, Indra Nooyi used to be the CEO of PepsiCo, and she's now on the board of directors of Amazon. So let's imagine that Indra Nooyi is calling your prospect, and the gatekeeper says to Indra Nooyi, what is this in reference to? I really doubt that Indra Nooyi is going to respond, oh, well, I used to be the CEO of PepsiCo, you know, Pepsi-Cola, the soft drink, and also we make Gatorade, the sports drink, and Tropicana, that's orange juice. And now I'm on the board of directors of Amazon, and, you know, we started out selling books, and now we sell everything, and Jeff Bezos is the world's richest man. Maybe you've heard of us? I don't think that's the answer. I think she's probably going to say something like, please tell whatever the prospect's name is, it's Indra Nooyi, and she's going to say it with a whole lot of confidence. So getting past human being gatekeepers, this is a skill. And how do you get the confidence? Well, it's having the right scripts, and it's also by practicing. And so that's in all of our programs. We practice with everyone because that's how you get the confidence. So let's switch gears here for a moment. And let's say you get voicemail. That's okay. You know, there's research, the RAIN group did research that they found on average, it takes 8 touches. Now a touch could be a phone call, it could be a voicemail, it could be an email, it could be a text, it could be a letter. It's a touch. It could be social media. So on average, it takes 8 of them to get somebody to respond. For you, it might be more, it might be less, but on average, it's 8. And so one of the questions that I am asked all of the time is, you know, Wendy, should I bother leaving a voicemail? Should I just send an email? What should I do? Well, we need a mechanism, since so many phone lines are answered by voicemail, we need a mechanism to get people to respond. So the answer is both. You're going to do a voicemail campaign. Think of that as a drip campaign for voicemail and email. Okay, and we're going to do 8 touches. So this is how it works on a voicemail campaign. We're going to do 8 touches, so that's 4 voicemails and 4 emails. Week 1, you reach out to that prospect. If you get their voicemail, you leave voicemail number 1 and you send along email number 1. Now, email 1 and voicemail 1 are the same. You sent voicemail and email. You wait about a week. If you haven't heard back from them, you reach out again. If you get voicemail, you leave voicemail number 2, which is different from number 1. Then you send email 2, which is the same as voicemail 2. So the voicemail and email combination, they always mirror each other. You wait about a week. If you haven't heard back from them, you reach out again. If you get voicemail, you leave voicemail number 3 and you send along email number 3. Wait about a week. If you haven't heard back, you reach out again. Get voicemail, you leave voicemail number 4 and you send along email number 4. Now, so we've touched them 8 times over the period of a month. If you do not hear back, you don't throw that lead out, you just recycle them. Bump them ahead a couple of months or 3 months or 6 months or a year. That's contingent on if there's a time frame that you need to meet and how many leads you have. Now here's the thing. People often say to me, you might be thinking, well, you know, nobody ever responds, nobody ever returns a phone call or responds to the email, and so why should I even bother doing this? So I want to do some math with you. Okay, let's assume that you're going to dial the phone 5 times every single day. And that could be warm leads, cold leads, doesn't matter. 5 dials every single day. That's 25 dials a week. There are 50 weeks. I'm giving you 2 weeks off for vacation. So 50 weeks times 25 dials, that's 1,250 dials in a year. Let's say 1% of those people returned your phone call. That would be 13 additional quality conversations with qualified prospects. You're bound, if you have 13 additional qualified conversations, you're bound to get 1 new client out of that. But let's say 10% of them returned your phone calls. And that is a completely doable number. We do that all the time. That would be 125 additional conversations. How many new clients do you think you would get if you had 125 additional conversations in a year? And here's the thing. With these numbers, you probably would not even notice that people were responding. But at the end of the year, that's a big number. Let's say you stepped it up even more and you did 20 dials a day. That's 100 dials a week. 50 weeks in a year, that's 5,000 dials. Cold leads, warm leads, doesn't matter, 5,000 dials every single year. If 1% of them returned your phone call, you would have 50 additional quality conversations. If 10%, again, that is a completely doable number. If 10% returns your phone call, that would be 500 additional conversations. What would that do for your bottom line if you had 500 additional quality conversations with prospects? And so that's why it's important to do this voicemail and email campaign and to do it in a very structured way. Okay, so moving along to the next step in the 4P prospecting process. I've just been talking about passing those gatekeepers, humans and voicemail. We're going to move on to prospect qualification. And I actually think of this as a process of disqualification. The idea is to find the best fit opportunities for you in your market and just disqualify the rest. Make sense? Okay, so we start with a definition. And that definition is what makes a qualified prospect for you in your market. Once you have that definition, it's easier to find them and it's easier to create that powerful messaging, and I'm going to talk about that in just a moment, that really resonates. We had somebody, Alina, she was in our program earlier in the year. Her prospects were at conferences. And so she would go to these conferences, and she told me after the program, she used to go to the conferences and talk about what she did, and she said she could see people's eyes glaze over. Once she learned this 4P process and how to create her messaging, which I'm going to talk about in just a moment, she said she used her introduction that we helped her create for telephone prospecting. She said their eyes would get big and they'd light up. And they completely got it. And she went home with a bunch of appointments. So we start with the definition of what makes a good prospect for you, because you can't be all things to all people. You with me? Okay. Most businesses, too many producers, too many advisors are reactive, just taking whatever comes in the door. And this is how I like to think about it. You get to choose. I mean, doesn't that feel powerful? You get to choose who you would like to do business with. So start by profiling your best clients. And by best, I mean the most profitable, because you're looking for prospects that match the profile of your best clients. And this needs to be objective criteria. So it could be company size, either in revenue or employee count. Maybe they need to be in a specific geographic location. Maybe they need to be in a certain industry. Or if you're calling in the consumer market, how old are they? Are they married? Are they single? Do they have children? What's their level of education? It needs to be very objective criteria. Because once you have that objective criteria, then you just focus on those best fit opportunities and disqualify the rest so you don't waste your time. You get to choose, so choose wisely. I had a client, and I'll share a little bit more about his story later on. He was a financial advisor. He was going on a lot of appointments. He was running all over the place. The problem was that they weren't a good fit for him. Many of them had no financial resources to speak of. He couldn't help them. He was very busy, he was running around and not doing any business. So once he learned this system, this 4P prospecting process, and creating that ideal prospect profile and just going for the best fit, everything changed for him. His revenue doubled. So again, you get to choose wisely. So going back to my 4P prospecting process, we've talked about the first 2 Ps. The first P is passing the gatekeepers, the human beings and the voicemail. And then the second P is prospect qualification. Selling is really a process of disqualifying so that you just spend your time with the best fit opportunities. This is really, it's a complete system. Here is step number 3, the third P, your powerful opening. Now, I know people like to divide calls into warm calls and cold calls. I actually prefer to think of this as introductory calling. Wherever you find that lead, you're calling to introduce yourself. And so when you get that human being on the phone, you want to be able to get their attention quickly and their willingness to engage. You want their eyes to light up. You want them to get it quickly. So this is what we're talking about today. This is introductory calling. And so you need your opening, your introduction, when you do get that prospect on the phone. You also need it for your voicemails, and you also need it for your emails, because, and you may have heard this when I talk about a powerful opening, we're really talking about your elevator speech. So how do you introduce yourself in such a way that your prospect's eyes light up, they get big, and they get it quickly? This is a skill, because what you say has to be really relevant to the person you're saying it to. And when you get this right, their eyes do really light up, and they open up their calendars and they book that first appointment with you. So here is the #1 secret to creating your introduction, your powerful opening. Nobody cares what you do. This is the sad truth. They really do not care. They care how they're going to be better off after you finish doing whatever it is that you do. And so this is true if it's a marketing lead, if it's a referral, if it's a networking contact from social media, or it's a cold lead. They really don't care about what you do. They want to hear how they're going to be better off after you finish whatever your process is. And so what you want to do is identify the challenge that your prospects have that you can help them with, and how do they talk about it? Not how do you talk about it, because in your industry, you have a jargon. You have a language that you use when you're talking among yourself, you're talking with your colleagues. Your prospects don't talk like that. So how do they talk about their challenges? Because it's not about the product. It's about the problem that you are solving. Whether you're a financial advisor making sure that your clients can take care of themselves and their families, or benefits consulting, helping employers recruit and retain great employees, having a safe and secure retirement, whatever it might be. What is their problem that you can help them with? How do they talk about it? And the differentiator for each of you, you do have a unique story to tell, because you are the only person in the entire world that has your clients that you have been able to help in the way you have been able to help them. And I'm going to share a story with you to make this a little bit more clear. If you are new at your company, that's okay, because then you're telling the company's story. But if you've been in the industry for a while, you have your own clients, you have a unique story to tell. And here's the example that I want to share with you. I had a client who was a financial advisor, and one Saturday morning, he got a phone call on his cell phone. And it was the recently widowed mother of one of his clients. So she wasn't his client, she was the mother of one of his clients. And she was recently widowed, and she was concerned about her grandchildren and making sure, now that her husband had died, she wanted to make sure that her grandchildren were going to be taken care of. And so my client, Joe, said to me, you know, it was Saturday morning, but I had to help her. And so what we did, we were able to use this story. And he was able to say that he does whatever it takes to make sure that his clients are taken care of. Now, you might say to me, hey, Wendy, everybody says that. And that may be true. A lot of people may say that. But the only person in the entire world that has that story about a client's recently widowed mother calling early on a Saturday morning on his cell phone is my client, Joe. That's the only person in the world that has that story. So he was able to create an introduction about helping his clients. He will do whatever it takes to take care of his clients. And then he could tell this story about his client's recently widowed mother and how he was able to help her too. And that story then illustrates his value proposition of doing whatever it takes to make sure that his clients are taken care of. Make sense? You all with me on this? So that's how you tell a story that gets your prospects' eyes to light up. It is not about what you do. It is not about the products. It is about the challenges that human beings have that you help them with. And the better you get at telling your story, that's when the prospects, their eyes light up and they open up their calendars and they book that appointment with you. Whether it's on the phone or as my client, Alina, that I told you about earlier, she was going to the conferences. She went home with a whole bunch of appointments because she was telling her unique story. Okay. So once you have told your unique story, there is another thing that you have to do. Let's pause and think about what's the goal. When you are speaking with a new prospect, a new lead, however you found that lead, your goal is to set up an appointment. And again, we're talking about introductory calling. We're not talking about dump whoever it is you're working with and hire me. You're asking them for an appointment. That is your goal. And one of the biggest mistakes that people make, well, it's actually two big mistakes that people make. The first is using language that your prospect interprets as you asking them to make some sort of hiring or buying decision. And they are unlikely to do that. And you may not even realize that you are using language that gets that reaction. So that's one of the things we do in our programs. We're very nitpicky with what clients are saying. We help them create their introductions because a few wrong words can really torpedo the whole thing. So you're looking to introduce yourself. Your goal is the appointment. That's one big mistake that people make. And then the other really big mistake that a lot of people make is simply not asking. You do need to ask for the appointment. And I recommend that you use, I call it the appointment setting mantra. And the appointment setting mantra goes like this. I'd like to introduce myself and whatever your company name is personally. I need 10 or 15 minutes, any time that works for you. Can we carve out some time next week, or is the week after better? And I call it a mantra because you keep repeating it. But you do need to have some language to ask for that appointment. And it's always so interesting to me because this is one of the biggest mistakes that I see is people simply not asking. So I've talked about 3 of the 4 Ps in the 4P prospecting process. It talked about passing those gatekeepers, the human beings that stand between you and the person you want to talk to, and voicemail, having a system, a step-by-step system, the voicemail campaign. You do it voicemail and email to get a percentage of these people to respond. Talked about prospect qualification. This is really where it all starts, with the definition of what makes a qualified prospect for you in your market with whatever it is, whatever your offering is. And then once you have identified that definition of a good prospect for you, then what is the introduction, that powerful opening that's going to enable you to tell your story in such a way that your prospect gets it and their eyes light up and they want to hear more. They want to engage. They want to set that appointment with you so they will hear more. And so that brings me to the 4th P of the 4P prospecting process, and that is responses. Now, having a powerful response to the objections that you might hear. Now, I know people worry about objections a lot. There's always a lot of conversation about responding to objections and having great rebuttals. The very best way to overcome objections is actually not to hear them in the first place. Make sense? And so what that means is, I'm circling back to my previous P. You need that powerful opening, that great introduction. Because when you have a great introduction, you don't hear so many objections. I'll tell you a story about my head of business development. His name is Tim. He's been working with me for a few years now. But when I hired him, we record our calls. So I would listen to the calls to, see that he was following the system and also to see if he needed any help. And I would listen to the recording and he would basically say what he had to say, and prospects would open up their calendars and book the appointment to talk to me. And that is what is supposed to happen. It is not supposed to be a struggle. Now, Tim is very smart. He's a great guy. He's got experience, and he's following our system. So when you have that powerful opening, you don't hear so many objections. And that's why we're so nitpicky with our clients about what they're saying, because this is just like real life. People respond to what you say to them. That's what happens in real life. It happens when you're prospecting. And actually, most people create the objections that they hear by what they are saying, okay? Just like real life. And I know one of the objections that people worry about all the time is, I'm not interested. I'm going to talk about that in just a moment. So let's assume you have a good introduction, you have a great introduction, but we do know that if a prospect does not immediately say yes to you, then this is very predictable, and we know what prospects will say. So if you get someone on the phone and you say what you have to say, and they do not immediately say yes, we know that they are likely to either say, I'm working with someone, I'm busy, they'll say, send me some information, or they'll say, I'm not interested. Those are the things that prospects say. So I'm going to break them down one by one. Okay, so let's take a step back here and again, think about the goal. Your goal is the appointment. So you've got your prospect on the phone, and remember, we're doing introductory calling. You're calling to introduce yourself. So your goal is an appointment. It is not dump whoever you're working with, hire me. It's not give me your credit card now. It's an introduction. So if you think about it like that, you're really only asking for time. You're asking that other human being, you're asking them to give you some time so that you can introduce yourself and so that you can introduce your company and your products and your services, and that's what you're doing. You're just asking for time. So if you think about it in this way, that you're only asking for time, many of these things that prospects say are actually fairly irrelevant to your goal of asking for some time so that you can introduce yourself. All right? So let's break it down one by one. Lots of times, this is probably the most common objection that people hear, is they say, you say what you have to say, you ask for the appointment, and they say, well, I'm working with someone. This is actually good news. If you're talking to someone that is working with someone, that means, first of all, they understand the value of having a financial advisor. They understand the value of having an insurance broker because they're working with one. You don't have to convince them. They're not a do-it-yourselfer, you know. So it's good news. And if they're working with a financial advisor, that means probably they have some money to invest. If they're working with a broker, you know, they have the financial wherewithal, or they have a line in their budget to cover some of these things. So if someone says to you, I'm working with someone, that's actually good news. You're speaking with a qualified prospect. And again, remember, you are not saying, dump them, hire me. That's not what you're saying. You're saying, I'd like to introduce yourself. So you can very easily say, I understand you're working with someone. Right now, I'd simply like to introduce myself. It's the truth. That's what you want. All right. Now, prospects will often tell you that they are busy. They're not lying to you. They are busy. But here's the thing. If we think of this as you're looking, it's an introductory call, you're looking to introduce yourself, you're simply asking them to give you some time, what that means is you're negotiating when. Everybody that you talk to is busy. It's just the truth. Everyone is busy. So think of this as negotiating when. They say they're busy. You say, I understand you're really busy. When do you think your time might free up a bit? So you are negotiating when, and even if it's a few weeks from now, you know, this time of year, you know, people will say, oh, the holidays are coming, can't do anything till after the holidays. And you know what, many years ago, before everybody had, before everything was online and we all had our smartphones, people literally would not have a calendar. They'd say, you know, oh, call me after the holidays. And they wouldn't even have a calendar for January. You couldn't make an appointment with them. But today, everything's online. They have their smartphones. If somebody says, I'm too busy right now with the holidays, no problem. How does January look for you? I understand you're really busy. So this is a negotiation of when this other human being might have a little bit of time to sit down so you can introduce yourself. Okay. Another thing that prospects say, they say, send me information. You ask for the appointment, they say, send me information. Has this ever happened to you? You call someone, they say, send me information. And you get all excited because you think you have somebody that's interested. And so you send them the email and everything they ask for, and then you never, ever talk to them again. Has that ever happened? I bet it has. Okay. People say, send me information for one of two reasons. The first reason may be that you don't have a great introduction. And if you don't have that powerful opening, they may say, send me information as a polite way of getting off the phone. What they're really saying is, I haven't heard anything that sounds really relevant, so I don't want to engage with you. So they're being polite. If you have a great introduction and somebody says, send me information, what they actually mean is, I'm busy. That's probably what they mean. So That's okay. We know everybody's busy. You can simply say to them, well, I'd be happy to send you some information. It's going to take you some time to look through it. I only need 10, 15 minutes of your time, and this way I can address your specific situation. When do you think your time's going to free up? So you can sort of sidestep that whole send me information and just go ahead and close on getting that appointment, because that's a perfectly reasonable response. And then number 4, the one that everyone is so scared of, I'm not interested. Wendy, what do I do when the prospect says I'm not interested? Well, there's actually only 2 reasons that people say I'm not interested. And the first one circles back to the second P in my 4P prospecting process. It means the first reason is you may not be speaking with a qualified prospect. If you have not done your homework, if you've not targeted well, prospects may indeed say, I'm not interested. Typically what that means is, why are you calling me? I have nothing to do with this. The other reason that prospects, if you've done your homework and you think you're talking to the right person, you're pretty sure you're talking to the right person, if everybody that you talk to says, I'm not interested, what that means is they don't think you're saying anything interesting. That is what it means. And so that circles back around to my third P of having that powerful opening. Because when you have a great introduction, prospects do not say, I'm not interested. Instead, what they do is they open up their calendars and book the appointment with you. So if you are hearing that a lot, if you're making calls, you're reaching out to prospects and you're hearing, I'm not interested, I'm not interested, I'm not interested, you need to check your definition of what makes a good lead for you to make sure that everybody you are reaching out to fits that within those parameters. And if they do, you need to create that introduction that is going to really resonate with those types of leads. And by the way, if you're calling in different markets, you have different types of leads that you're calling on, you probably need different introductions. Now, that said, if every once in a while somebody says to you, I'm not interested, I'd ask them why. I would say, I understand you're not interested. May I ask you why? Because you might get some information that will enable you to turn that around. Maybe you need to be speaking with somebody else. Maybe the company's going out of business. Maybe, you never know, but you could certainly ask. So I understand you're not interested. May I ask you why? So to summarize what I've been talking about today with my 4P prospecting process, there are really 4 steps to getting more qualified appointments. Step number 1 is having the skill set and the system to bypass the gatekeepers. You got the human beings, knowing what to say to them is a skill. Having the confidence to execute, that's practice. And then having that voicemail and email campaign system to get some of these prospects to return phone calls or respond to your emails. Prospect qualification. It all starts with a definition. And you get to choose. And I just think that is so powerful that you get to choose. The question a lot of people ask themselves is, who wants to do business with me? That is the wrong question. The right question is, who do I want to do business with? And you get to choose and you get to introduce yourself. Once you have done that, once you know what your target is, then you need to create that powerful opening, that introduction for your introductory call that stops prospects in their tracks, that makes their eyes light up, get big and light up, and they get it so that they want to engage with you. And then once you have that powerful opening, since we know that prospecting is very predictable, and if they do not immediately say yes to you, they're likely to say, one of four things: I'm working with someone, I'm busy, send me information, or maybe I'm not interested. But if you got that great introduction and you've done your prospect qualification, they won't say the last thing. Okay, so I'm going to open up for questions in just a little bit, which because that's always my favorite part. Before I do that, I want to share two stories with you. This is Aaron. Aaron learned the 4P prospecting process. He was brand new. He was brand new in the industry. He paid off his entire college debt, $60,000 in 6 months. And this is Jerry. I mentioned Jerry earlier. Jerry was running all over the place. He had a lot of appointments, just they weren't the right people. They didn't have the financial resources. He couldn't even help them. And so once he learned this 4P prospecting process and the prospect qualification, as you can see, his revenue doubled in half the time. He didn't double his effort. He's taking more time off. As a matter of fact, he goes to Hawaii a few times a year, and he takes ballroom dance classes. So I'm very proud of Jerry. So if you would like to learn more about the 4P prospecting process, if you want to be able to build your pipeline of opportunities faster, more easily, more profitably, if you know this is critically important, you know you need to master this, you can't wait to have results, and you're ready, you're able, you're willing to invest in yourself, then let's have a conversation. And Brendan, if you would be good enough to put this link in the chat box for everybody. Yeah, there's no fee or obligation or anything like that. We're just going to talk. I'm going to ask you to give me a little background, your phone number. I will call you, and we'll talk. If I can help you, I will tell you that. If I feel like I can't help you, I will tell you that too. So it's just a conversation. If you'd like to talk to me, I would very much enjoy speaking with you. And so now, what questions? Do we have questions, Brendan?
We do, and I want to remind everyone that you can go ahead and type your questions into the chat box or into the Q&A. Jerry, was that his name that liked to ballroom dance and go to Hawaii? Is that correct?
Jerry, yeah, my client Jerry. He goes to Hawaii and takes ballroom dance classes. He sent me a picture with his partner at one of their competitions.
Well, I don't know about the ballroom dancing, but it's probably nice and warm in Hawaii right now. That sounds real good.
Very nice and warm in Hawaii. better than here where I am, at any rate.
Well, Wendy, one thing that occurs to me during your presentation, and thank you for that outstanding presentation, lots of very useful information in that, is we have a leadership development program here at NAIFA called Lily. John Maxwell is one of the authors that we have as required reading, and he's got The Power of the Picture. So great minds think alike. It's interesting how the power of the picture, in his case, in terms of leadership, overlaps with your power of the picture in terms of cold calling. So very good information.
Yes.
Now, in terms of questions, now, of course, we live in a very digital age, obviously. Why should I use the phone to prospect when no one actually answers their phone anymore?
Okay, great question. Thank you for addressing the elephant in the room. And here's the thing. Actually, people do answer their phones. They don't answer them the way they used to, but they do answer their phones. And so depending on the market that you're in, the research shows that somewhere in the neighborhood of maybe 5 to even up to 30%, every time you dial the phone, 5 to 30%, depending on your market, will actually answer the phone. So if somebody answers the phone, you can actually have a conversation with them. But that's also why we do the voicemail and email campaign, to get people to respond. And I mentioned this earlier, but there's actual research. It was done at the University of Chicago Booth School of Business. And what they found was that when people hear your voice, when they hear you talk, they're more likely to take action on whatever it is you're talking about. And what we have found internally and also with our clients, because we teach this for voicemail, for email, step-by-step process. And sometimes people, and most of your responses, I will say, most people will respond by email. They won't necessarily return the phone call. But what we have found, both internally and also with our clients, is when you stop leaving the voicemails, you say, oh, well, everybody's just emailing me, so I'm just going to email, the response rate goes down. So the point is really that when they hear you talk, you're making that human being to human being connection that you just can't make through an email. They hear you, they make a judgment, and is this somebody I'd like to have a conversation with? Did they sound like a nice person? You know, so all the things that when you meet someone that's sort of sizing up, that happens in a voicemail. And if you've got something compelling to say and you say it and you leave that, send that email as well, you can get a significant number of people to respond. So that's why it's important to pick up the phone.
And we have a comment from Brian. He says, I think the problem is so many robocalls about charitable donations and extending your car warranty have turned people off to answering phone numbers they don't recognize.
I think that's true. I couldn't really argue with you on that, Brian.
Another challenge to overcome in this whole process.
Yeah.
Now, Wendy, I don't prospect in my daily work. However, there are certain calls I don't want to make that I'm afraid to make. How do I and how do NAIFA members overcome any fear and reluctance that they have to making prospecting calls?
Okay, thank you for asking that, because I know a lot of people feel this way. And I think a large part of the problem is that the conversation around this has been very stupid. The conversation around picking up the phone and talking to people has been, there are some people that love it and everybody else hates it. So it's always talked about in this love-hate kind of thing. But here's the thing, you don't need to love this. The opposite of hating it is not that you now love it. The opposite of hating it is that you're just neutral. It's a business function, it's a sales function. It's something you need to do to grow your book of business. If, no matter where you find a lead, and I'm not talking just about cold calling, I'm talking about what is often described as warm calling. You need to talk to people. If you met somebody at a conference, you might need to call them. You met somebody online, you want to get them offline so you can talk to them. So the idea is not that you now love this. The idea is you're neutral. You can do what you need to do and be really successful at it. And so what I would ask is, what is the story you're telling yourself about making the call? Because there are the facts, and then there are the stories we tell ourselves about the facts. The facts are you need to call someone. You're going to reach them or not. If you reach them, you're going to say something, they're going to say something. That's it. And those are the facts. The stories are, well, I'm bothering them. They won't want to talk to me. I'm interrupting them. They're going to be mad at me. What if your story was, I have something of value to offer this person that I'm reaching out to, and I have a pretty good idea that they might need some kind of help. And so, because I've done my homework and I'm going to reach out, I'm going to just introduce myself and ask them to spend a little bit of time talking to me. And they're going to be glad I called. I mean, what if that's how you thought about it? What would change for you? So any of you that are uncomfortable with this, take a look at your stories. And the one other thing I want to say about this is, the other thing I have seen over all the years I've been doing that is once you have a very simple system to use, and once you follow the 4P prospecting process and you know what you're doing every step along the path, it gets so much easier and so much of that fear goes away because you know what you're doing.
Yeah, it's a mindset, isn't it? It really is.
Yeah, it really is a mindset. And I believe it was Henry Ford that said, either you think you can or you think you can't, and either way you're right.
Yeah, very true.
Yeah.
Dale Carnegie, I think over 90% of worry is just spinning our wheels over something that's not even going to happen. What's the worst they're going to do? Hang up on me? I mean, so what? You know. So.
And if you do it well, it actually almost never happens. In all the years I've been doing this, and I've been in business now about 25 years, the number of times somebody has hung up on me, I could count on one hand in 25 years, you know. And it's not that I am supremely gifted or anything like that. I was lucky. Somebody taught me how to do this. That day job that I got all those years ago, they taught me the skill. They coached me. They held my hand then until, you know, I had the training wheels on for a long time, but they helped me until I got it. And once I got it, that enabled me to build a business. And so the really good news here for, you know, any of you that if you're not where you want to be, you can learn how to do this. It's a communication skill.
Very true. Well, I want to thank Wendy Weiss, the queen of cold calling, for her time and expertise today, presenting to NAIFA members. And as a reminder, we have these Big Ideas webinars every month. And just a quick commercial, January 14, we'll have Vonda Van Thiel once again joining us from the Social Security Administration. She'll be answering any questions that you have regarding Social Security for yourself, for your clients, including any changes to the law. So please do plan to join us on January 14, 3 p.m. Eastern Time. More information is available at www.naifa.org. And I also want to thank all the NAIFA members that participated today. This is Brendan Burnett, NAIFA's Director of Professional Development, and this concludes the webinar.